Welcome to the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Rosensweet, mom of 3 young people, peaceful parenting coach, and your cheerleader and guide on all things parenting. Each week, we'll cover the tools, strategies, and support you need to end the yelling and power struggles and encourage your kids to listen and cooperate so that you can enjoy your family time. I'm happy to say we have a great relationship with our 3 kids. The teen years have been easy and joyful, not because we're special unicorns, but because my kids were raised with peaceful parenting. I've also helped so many parents just like you stop struggling and enjoy their kids again. I'm excited to be here with you today and bring you the insight and information you need to make your parenting journey a little more peaceful. Let's dive into this week's conversation. Hey all, welcome back to another episode of the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. Today's guest is Dani Faust. She is, aside from a mom of 2, she's a mindset and manifesting coach and mentor. And you might be wondering, why is she on a parenting podcast? One of the things that she works with mostly women about is creating the life that they want to have. And one of the things that we talk about is here in this podcast and in our community is being the parent that you want to be. And one thing that often gets in the way of that is that we feel like we're not calm and confident when we're parenting our children. The calm bit is the one that really stands out a lot to a lot of parents, that they get triggered by their kids. And it's really interesting, in all the years that I've been working with parents, it's so clear that all of us have different triggers based on our experiences in life and our experiences as children. And I had heard Dani on another podcast, you'll hear us talking about that, but talking about reparenting and how to help ourselves when our inner child or our little you, or whatever you want to call it, is sort of getting in the way of us being the parents that we want to be. So that's the main thing that Dani and I talked about, and I think you'll be really interested in some of the suggestions that she has for helping us when that's happening and how to know when it's happening. And as a bonus, we also talked a little bit about just creating the kind of life that you want for yourself and, how to get closer to being that parent that you want to be. We're going to dive in with Dani in just a second, but before we go there, I want to remind you that you can check out my free How to Stop Yelling at Your Kids course by going to sararosensweet.com/yelling. If while you're working on figuring out what your triggers are and how to heal them, you want to learn how to just stay calm in the moment and to, regulate yourself, which, as we know, is the first big idea of peaceful parenting. And it doesn't mean that we don't get frustrated or upset. It just means that when we do feel frustrated or upset or angry, we can work to calm ourselves so that we don't react out of anger with our kids, and instead we can respond to them. And so check out the free course, How to Stop Yelling at Your Kids, sararosensweet.com/yelling, while you're working on everything that Dani and I are going to be talking about today. So let's dive in and meet Dani. Hi, Dani. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Hi. Thanks for having me.
So could you just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Dani Faust. I am a hypnotherapist, an energy healer, and a life and wellness coach. And my work kind of skews towards mindset and manifesting for women. And I am a New Yorker, currently living in South Florida, 2 kids and a husband.
And I saw a picture of you with Oprah on your Instagram. How did you meet Oprah?
Yeah.
What, like a total fangirl moment here.
Same, because I stalked her in that party. I for about 10 years, I was making a living doing influencing and parenting blogging. And during that time, I lucked into a relationship with the gentleman who does the Disney movie premieres. And I was invited to come to the premiere and interview her. And that photo you see is a result of me stalking her through a premiere party and dipping past her security and just word vomiting on her. And she took that photo of us.
That's so awesome. I love that so much. My celebrity moment was with Martha Stewart.
Oh my goodness. How was it?
It was great. I was actually before I was a parenting coach, I was a craft blogger, and I used to do a lot of needle felting, and I was actually on the Martha Stewart show teaching her how to do needle felting about 15 years ago. So, between the two of us, Martha Stewart and Oprah, how much better
Winning.
can you get?
That's amazing. So cool.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's dive into the parenting stuff. So I first heard you on Yolanda Williams' podcast, Parenting Decolonized. Shout out to that podcast. It's a really great one if anyone doesn't know it. And you were talking about reparenting. And I just think that that's why I wanted to have you on today, because so much comes up for my clients and the people in my community around their childhood experiences and childhood wounds and the areas where they didn't get their needs met. And whether it's trauma with a big T or trauma with a small t. But, what I find with my work with clients is that it's not about our child's actions that trigger us. It's about our responses or our thoughts or our feelings about our child's actions. And a lot of times what comes up for people when they really investigate that is something that's from their own childhood, right? So I know I've heard you on Yolanda's podcast saying that you don't really like the term reparenting. So tell us about what you call it and why, and sort of just maybe give a brief for folks who don't know what that term means. Maybe just give a little brief definition of it, and then we'll go
Yeah,
there.
absolutely. But I do want to just say one thing. I think it's definitely more about how we feel and how we respond to our child's actions, but it's definitely also about the child's actions because they're expressing a need. And doing the reparenting work only helps us recognize it in them and ourselves and heal both up and down,
Yeah, I guess what I mean is like a child can do something that for one parent it would totally trigger them, and for a different parent it wouldn't at all.
Gotcha.
And so it's not that, it's that the behavior becomes a trigger when we have our own thoughts or feelings or experiences that it touches on. Like, my 12-year, I don't have a 12-year-old, but if I had a 12-year-old still and they rolled their eyes at me, it might be totally triggering for me. But if your 12-year-old rolled your eyes at you, it might not be triggering for you at all, depending on what you're bringing to the inner stuff that you bring to that experience.
Gotcha. Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. I misunderstood. Yeah. So reparenting, the term in itself, similarly to what you just said, the term is not harmful, but I have noticed that, especially with my clients, parents, mothering, fathering, parenting, those words can be triggers in themselves for people who maybe grew up in the foster system and didn't have it and longed for that, or who have volatile relationships with their mother, father, or both parents. So I like to call it inner child work. And I've also kind of shifted from calling it inner child work to primarily calling it little you work. And as I work with clients, we tend to start with the little you, and then we go to teen you, and then we go to young adult you. So it's really just the past you work. And I have noticed that it's a gentler transition for people when we call it that versus reparenting, because some people who did have a good relationship or experience with their parents might put up a wall saying, "Oh, I don't need to reparent. My parents are fine. What are you saying?" So I feel like it's more
disloyal or something.
Yeah. We have even the most capital T traumatized clients that I have spoken with still feel a loyalty to their parent, and we have to work around that, respect it because it's valid, and work around that to get them the healing and closure or whatever it is that they're looking for.
Okay, cool. So when, I just gave an example of, your kid rolling their eyes at you, and it makes you like feel, anywhere from like mildly upset to rage, depending on the situation or what you're bringing to it. Maybe you could give some examples of how you can tell that it's like some inner work that needs to be done. And I don't know, just speak to that a little bit.
Sure. I tell people the trauma is the past. The trigger is the path. So if something triggers you, and let's remember that if you're in a place of alignment, you're feeling great, they roll their eyes on Monday and you're feeling great, you might not have a reaction. On Tuesday, you just got fired, you're annoyed, you're fighting with your husband, they roll your eyes, it's a trigger. So same person, same action, different response. So when it comes to, say, that eye roll, the way to know is if you automatically have a reaction versus a little pause to say, what is he or she doing? Like, why are they doing that? If you have that pause for any moment, I view it as less of a trigger and more of, okay, this is an annoying thing at the moment, and I need to just talk to them about their behavior or whatever it is that you do in your household. But if it's an automatic internal rage or questioning or a feeling of less than, or I've got to react right now, that's when it might be something a little under the surface bubbling here. Let me take a look at it.
Do you have any strategies for how you can take a look at that and figure out what it is that you need to do for that inner work or the little you work?
Yeah, so first it takes presence, right? It takes a level of mindfulness for you to even notice your actions in the first place. So for that, I tell people to just be on point with their spiritual, mental, emotional hygiene. And that's different things like breathwork or meditation or even just journaling or taking a moment for yourself to breathe. Anything that keeps you centered, closer to alignment, whatever that looks like for you, is the best way to be able to be present and mindful enough to stop yourself and notice your behavior, your reaction, your response. So there's that part of it. Then in the moment, I always tell people to get grounded or get centered. And it's very funny because very recently I told this to a client and she was like, "You always tell me to get centered. I don't know what you mean." And I was like, "I've been telling you this for like 6 months and now you're telling me you don't know?" Anyhow, so I tell people it's very psychosomatic. So breath and body. Put your hand on your heart or on your solar plexus and take a nice deep breath. Close your eyes if you feel safe or able to, and I tell people, let your brain go down into your belly. So that's really putting your awareness to where your hand is over your solar plexus or your heart, and take a deep breath into that space. And what you'll notice is that things will naturally slow down for you. Things will naturally calm. You'll get pulled downward into a sense of, I am here, I am grounded, I am safe. And then when you open your eyes, you're in a whole different mindset, a whole different energy state. So you can handle that moment a little better. So then you won't respond with anger or a knee jerk reaction to the child. And then you have the wherewithal to go somewhere and maybe journal or do some type of start the reparenting work process.
Are there any questions okay, after you're out of the moment, or maybe you didn't even manage to stay calm in the moment, but then you're lying in bed at 2 a.m. and feeling bad for yelling at your 12-year-old when she rolled her eyes at you or whatever. And so maybe, you do that, put your brain into your belly. Is that what you said? Yeah. Putting your brain into your belly then. Do you have any questions or where to start to find out what that inner child needs or what that inner child wants you to know?
Yes, you can literally ask her. You can picture little you in your mind as you're laying there in bed. Just take a few deep breaths and set the intention that whatever you need to know right now will present itself. Because this is layered work. It doesn't happen one and done. This is a process and a journey. And it's like a long healing wound, right? So you're picking up the band aid, checking, nope, put the band aid back on, keep going. So I would say you're laying in bed. I would suggest that you set the intention that you're going to be given what you need to see right now so that you can make your next best step forward. And I would ask little you, picture little you in your mind's eye. However you envision things when you read a book or when you daydream, that's visualization. So if you can visualize little you without looking at a picture, that's great. If you want to find a picture of young you on your phone and look at it, then you ask yourself, what did you need right then? Why did that hurt your feelings? How can I support you? And I found that when I ask an open question like, what do you need? That can take me on a visualization or a mind journey that goes from a hug or just sit in color with me to let's burn this whole house down. So it's runs the gamut, but you want to give you what you need. And I noticed that a lot of young children picture someone coming to save them. So sometimes it'll be like, okay, Superman flies in and takes you out of the house or whatever the you needed then. And sometimes it's an I don't know because that child just has all these big feelings and they really don't know. And when if you're in that place when you're asking yourself and you are not getting the answer, a hug works. Sitting down next to them works, and then let it grow from there, but it will grow from there.
So I was going to say so much love and compassion.
Yes. Yes. That's really the underlying thing. But sometimes I've noticed that, and this happened to me actually when I first started my inner work, is that I didn't trust myself coming back to like, hey, I'm here to save you from your wounds and your trauma. It's just like, who the heck are you, lady? You know? So I had to just sit there in the room while little me was doing what she's doing and not trusting me until I built that trust. And then we went and burnt stuff down, literally.
Mhm. I think it's helpful to ask, like, what would, say you were that 12-year-old who rolled their eyes at your mom or your dad or caregiver, what would have happened? Would you have dared to do that? If you did do that, what would have happened? Because I think that, you're seeing yourself in that 12-year-old who rolls their eyes and like, you shouldn't, you're not, if you do that, you'll get love withdrawn, you'll get slapped, you'll get, people won't care about your feelings because there's often, I think, that part that gets reflected back to us, right? With our child's behavior that's triggering.
Absolutely. That there is a place for that in the work that I do. We don't pull on that part of it so much. It just feels like like coming back into that loop of pain. So instead of thinking like, oh, what would have happened to me had I done that, I shift it to the new place of, okay, it wasn't safe for me to express my feelings, because rolling my eyes is expressing my disdain for you, mom, or whatever it is. It wasn't safe for me to express my feelings. So what would I have liked to have happened? What does feeling safe expressing my feelings, what would that have looked like versus what the consequence would have been for me had I done it? So
Yeah, because
that I feel
maybe do you think it might be a little too re-traumatizing or something to go to that spot
I
for
haven't
some
had that
people?
experience. I just feel like it might. And it like keeps us in that loop of staying within the trauma versus going out to it. So maybe that's something people would do in like deeper therapy versus a coaching program. So possibly, but I don't do that type of work. Even in the hypnotherapy I do, when we do the age regression, we spend a shorter time in the actual trauma part and a longer time getting out and getting to what we want the healed whole version to be.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, when I think of reparenting, I always think of, maybe our needs didn't get met how we needed when we were children. But part of it for me is meeting our own needs as adults. And that seems to be sort of what you're saying. Like, maybe people didn't listen to you or didn't take your feelings into consideration when you were a child. But now that you're an adult, I think it's our job to do that for ourselves. Is that what it means to you as well?
For sure. And there is an activity that I do where you either literally rewrite the story, or envision the new ending on the story. So say you were 14 and you rolled your eyes at your mom and you got slapped, and it's a very painful, capital T for you, trauma. What you would do is go back to that first time you remember that happening, and then you roll your eyes and then you write out the new story. And in this one, your mom just says, hey, don't do that. That's not cool. And then you have a conversation about your feelings, both of you. And then you walk off arm in arm and get ice cream or whatever it is. You make it as happy, sugary sweet as you want it to be, as you wanted it to be as a teen or child.
Right, right. Nice. Are there any daily practices that you recommend for people who maybe find that their inner you needs their inner child or their little you needs some love?
Yeah. So what I tell people to kind of be wary of is spending so much time in inner you that things get unbalanced with their actual day-to-day adulting. But since I do suggest that everyone find a way to have silence or meditation time in their daily spiritual hygiene, it is very safe for you to just take a little time and ask, hey, little you, do you need anything today? Hands on heart, eyes closed, picture yourself, and whatever age you picture yourself in that day, because it changes day to day, that's who you're working with that day. And hey, do you need anything? You need a little comfort? Okay, how about we get some cocoa and snuggle in bed and watch a movie for a few minutes or whatever. You will you'll give yourself what you need when you're quiet and ask. You will always find an answer. And sometimes the answer will surprise you.
I love that. I mean, that reminds me so much of some things that, I hear a lot in my community of, especially moms, just to be totally honest, that are always doing things for everybody else. And then they feel resentful. Like I have this little like catchy line of like, when you feel resentful, it's often a sign that you need to do some reparenting, because that feeling of like, well, what about me? What about me? Like, why am I'm doing all these things for everybody else, and nobody's noticing what I need. And I always think, well, okay, it's not that everybody doesn't deserve to be in a caring relationship with a partner, or have their kids care about them or whatever, but it's really like up to us to ask that question, what do I need? And then provide that for ourselves. So that sort of seems a little bit similar to what you're saying, and just asking that, what do I need?
Absolutely. And it is also safe, if it's safe for you in your life situation, it's also okay for you to say, hey, partner, this is what I need today.
Yes,
Hey, kids, this
hundred
is what I
percent.
need from you as
But
well.
you're in charge of telling them what you need, not waiting
Yes.
for them to notice what you need. I
Yes.
guess I should
So,
like totally
yeah.
clarify that. Like, you're not waiting for people to notice what you need, but you're in charge of telling them what you need. Yeah, I have a neighbor of mine who she's a little bit older than I am, and she had a home daycare. And so when we spent a lot of time together when my kids were little, because she had the other kids at the park or whatever. And I'll never forget her one time telling me that it was her birthday, and her husband came home, and her birthday is in the winter, and he came home with these like bouquet of half dead flowers that he got at the corner store, and they'd frozen on the way home. And it was the night before her birthday. And he said, honey, I got you these flowers for your birthday. And she took the flowers and walked over to the garbage can and stomped the lid open. Those the ones where you stomp and the lid flies up. She threw them in the garbage, and she said, "You're lucky my birthday's not until tomorrow. You have another day to get me a proper present, and here's what I want." She told him like 3 different possibilities and stores that he could go to get her a proper present. I'm not saying everyone should do that, but I have to say my mouth was hanging open, and I was like, you can do that? Like you can tell people like exactly what you need. And that was such a like eye-opening awakening for me to hear that.
I love that she did that. I love that she told you and that it gave you the aha, because I was actually someone who thought, if my husband loved me enough, he'll know what I'm missing and he'll get me that one little thing. It's just like, where did I even get that from? Like romantic comedies? No, he's a meathead. I have to tell him exactly, go to Macy's. This is what I want. This is the picture.
Yeah, totally.
Go.
Yeah. And I think a lot of, and again, I'm like painting with a broad brush, but I think a lot of women wait for other people to try and read their minds and figure out what they need. And they don't say what they need. And maybe that's from hoping that when you're little that your parents will figure out what you need and give it to you, right? Which is their job. Like it is your parents' job or your caregivers to figure out what you need and provide that for you. But then when you're an adult, like it's your own job to say, I need this, right?
Absolutely. And I've also noticed it in the other way where parents are so overbearing, so strict, and so limiting that it's like you don't even want to make a decision on what you want. You're going to just, whatever mom and dad give me, it's what I need. And that carries over into adulthood. If you're someone who can't make decisions very quickly or ask everyone for their opinion on what you should do about XYZ thing, then you'll notice that you won't find it safe to ask for what you need in various areas.
Yeah. And I think another way that shows up is that like hyper independence of I don't have any needs, like children who feel like they have to be small and quiet and not be demanding of anything. And that's the only way that they get the love that they need, right? Or get their needs met is by not having needs. And then you turn into a grown up who's like, I can do everything by myself. I don't need anyone, which is, rewarded in a lot of ways too, I think, in our culture.
Sure, certainly in corporate America, that is certainly rewarded, and it's so amazing. Even just the different examples that we're giving of the same seed sprouts all these different flowers, and that's part of why reparenting or little you work is so important, because maybe your friend Tina had this very same experience as you and she's fine. And then you had that experience and it is tearing you up inside. We tend to kind of invalidate the trauma that we had because someone else is dealing with it, or because maybe yours was your parents never listened to you, told you to shut up, but over there they're having, criminally abusive situations. And so you think, well, I shouldn't, complain because I just had this little scenario. We'll invalidate and we won't seek help for a broken heart the same way we would seek help for a broken arm. And it's it's interesting to see.
Brene Brown addresses that, like, that person has it worse, so I shouldn't feel sorry for myself. And she's talks about how there's no shortage of empathy. Like, of course you can empathize for yourself, even if other people, have it worse than you do. And that in fact, not having empathy for ourselves makes us less capable of having empathy for other people. So I think that's really helpful to remember, because I think you're right. Like you can always find someone who has it worse than you had it, but that shouldn't invalidate the difficulties that you had in, have in your life now or as a child.
Yes, I think more people could stand to learn that lesson. I think politics would look a lot different. I think our society at large would look a lot different.
Yeah, for sure. So I think I actually, as I said in the beginning, I know that a lot of the work that you do is around manifesting. So can we do like a little bonus part of the podcast? Like, well, first of all, is there anything else you want to add about reparenting that you think would be helpful for listeners that we didn't talk about? We kind of did like a really like super jazzed 20 minutes here of reparenting, but maybe there's some more that you feel we should talk about.
I think the main thing I want to leave listeners with is that you have the answers inside you. You know what you need to fuel you, fulfill you, heal you. And all you have to do is get centered and ask yourself. And don't be afraid to do this work. Any tiny, teeny step you take in the direction of reparenting or inner child work is a win. So take your time, be gentle with yourself. And if you feel like you need help, reach out to a parenting coach like Sarah, reach out to a coach like me, or someone to support you in the journey.
Love that. And just, yeah, I think every time you feel upset or triggered, think to yourself, like, what is it that's below the surface here? Like, what is this touching on in me? And like, what do I need to give myself and take care of myself in the moment or afterwards in when I reflect on it? Okay. So can you speak to, like, just give us a little bonus here about manifesting, maybe specifically for parents, like what that would look like? I don't really know much about it. Like, I'm
Yeah.
curious.
Well, manifesting is bringing your desires into your lived experience, right? It's something that you have been doing all your life. If you look around your room, everything there, you've manifested it in some way, shape, or form. So what I teach is intentional manifesting. So you're not going by default. Most of us operate by default. We just go along, living our lives. But when we put intention behind anything, including manifesting, it helps to make it more efficient and more of a beautiful process. Because we're here on earth, no matter what your views, religion, or anything, we're here to create a beautiful life. So manifesting is doing just that. Especially as parenting, I think the most important thing is setting the vision for what you want your parenting relationship to look like with your children and your parenting partnership if you have a parenting partner. What do you want that to look like? Get really crystal clear on how that looks and how that feels for you, how you want it to feel for your children, and start there. Because once you have that clear vision, it's easy for you to craft the next steps to make it come to life for yourself.
What do folks do when there's like a gap between what their present experience is and what they are dreaming it could be?
Girl, there is always a gap, first of all. So know that the gap is normal. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not a bad parent because there is a gap. What that is data. And so now we know where we're at, where we're trying to go, and now we can kind of slide them together by our daily actions. So in my kind of lingo that I've created, it's like you're at 1.0 and the version of you that has everything you want is 2.0. So you look at all the aspects of you 2.0 and decide what you can do today that brings you closer to them. So, for example, right now, you just go to bed at night, you don't tuck the kids in, you don't read a story, you're just exhausted at the end of the day. But in the ideal parenting version of yourself, you read a story, you guys meditate, you guys journal together, or do some type of practice before bed. That's a simple thing that you can do starting today, even if it's just 5 minutes, to get you closer to that idealized version that you're trying to manifest. So see where you can pull from that version of yourself into today, and that'll help you feel a little motivated and jazzed up to go forward in other ways as well.
And what do you find gets in the way of people when they're trying to get from 1.0 to 2.0?
Ooh, girl, that's a whole other episode. But
In 30 seconds. No, I'm just kidding.
quick. So, it's everything that gets in the way of anything else. So all of our stories and beliefs we have about ourselves and who we are, because remember, we don't manifest by just saying, oh, I want this thing, let me wait for it to happen. We manifest by who we are being and how we are showing up in the world and what we're doing and how we're thinking and feeling throughout our lives. So all the limiting stories and resistance that we have and beliefs about who gets what in this world and all sorts of stories that come together and kind of limit us as to, oh, well, that type of parent does this, but I'm this type of parent. Labels, rules, all that stuff is what kind of keeps that gap in place. But the more work you do, even the reparenting work that you do, helps you pull out those stories and realize that it is BS and just continue going towards that desired reality.
Mm-hmm. So, maybe I mean, when you're talking about that, I'm thinking about how self-compassion is probably a really big part of that also with that gap, right? Like not beating yourself
Absolutely.
up about 1.0, like, oh, I can't believe I'm not 2.0 yet, but like not beating yourself up about all of the, the challenges that you've had and the how hard you've tried and everything.
Yeah, looking at your challenges with a loving eye is so important. And I hear so many people talking about self love, self love. I feel like self compassion and self acceptance are a greater thing to reach for first until we can reach that higher pillar of love. Because if we're in a place of accepting, we are showing so much grace to ourselves. If we're in a place of compassion, we are saying, hey, you, I get you. I see the hard work you're doing and I validate you. I support you. Let's do this together. You're working in just within all the layers of who you are. You're working together to go forward. That self-compassion, I think, is the backbone for almost every single thing that we try to do as humans.
Totally. And I think that people get mistaken. They think, well, if I give myself compassion about this, it's saying that it's okay that I did X, Y, or Z. I yelled at my kids 5 times yesterday or whatever. And I think that we have to understand that's not it. It's saying like you're worthy and lovable, even though you yelled at your kids 5 times yesterday. And of course you yelled at your kids 5 times yesterday because you had these pressures on you from, work stress or, you were sick or whatever the thing was. So for me, that even though is so important, and that's what helps us get to the self-love is when we believe that we're worthy and lovable, even though.
Yes, I love that. Even though I call it the wide eyes, because we'll look at everyone with wide eyes and think, well, they were dealing with this, so maybe that's why. We'll give people all the grace in the world, and then with us, it's like this pointed eye, very direct, and oh, well, you failed here, and that means you're bad. And it's like, whoa, let's broaden our view. Let's look with the wide eyes. I like your even though.
Yeah, I heard someone once say that was like you're like the ultimate narcissist if you think that if you hold yourself to a higher standard than you hold everybody else to.
I like
Right?
that.
I'm better than everybody else. I can't fall down. I can't be human, right? I mean, it's kind of tongue in cheek, but I think that's so true. Like we are so much harder on ourselves than we are on anyone else in our lives.
Yes, and then moms, I think it's like triple that. Parents, but moms especially, because that's the population I work with. We act like we're supposed to be Mother Teresa and Martha Stewart at home. Just have to be complete perfection all around, and then everyone else, it's okay if you mess up. Hey, you're lovable still, but not us.
Yeah. Well, let's give
Reparenting
our
helps with that.
yeah, let's definitely. And I think that just going back very quickly to the reparenting thing, I think what we're fighting against is the message that we were given as children is that we're more lovable when, right? Or we're less lovable when this. And so it's trying to embrace that you're lovable and worthy, even when, and I think that's part of the big work of reparenting is just accepting ourselves with all of our flaws and our imperfections. And then we can do that for our kids so that hopefully they don't have to do as much work as we've had to do.
Absolutely. We're never going to be a perfect parent. That doesn't exist. But as we heal and we have that wider, bigger eyed view of ourselves and our experience as children, it naturally, I don't want to even say trickles down, but it naturally has an overflow experience for our children. We are more empathetic and empathic with them and just so much more patient. I always grew up saying that I'm just an impatient person. I don't want to stand on a line. I don't want to wait. No, never. But with my kids, I noticed that I'm just like, am I patient? Hold on a second. Am I growing up? Because that patience that you learn, that you just start to embody after realizing the way you were operating and then opening up to a new way of operating, you naturally just view everything with a more, and again, broad brush, but a more loving, open, accepting heart.
Yeah. And we can't give that to anyone else if we can give it to ourselves. That's the hard truth.
It is, isn't it? Oof. Got to do the work. The inner work is always required. Darn.
Yeah.
No shortcut.
When my working with parents over the past years, after a couple sessions, they always say, this isn't even about my kids, is it? Like, oh, ding, ding, ding. There's the secret. Okay, so 2 final questions. One is the question that I ask all my guests, which is, if you could go back to your younger parent self, what advice would you give yourself?
Have more children.
I love that.
Have more children. I envisioned myself as a child. I envisioned myself with 2 kids. Once I had 2 kids, I envisioned myself with a house full of 6. And then I was like, no, that's not feasible. That's not realistic. Now I'm like, oh, I should have just kept having babies nonstop.
Yeah. We would have had more if we started younger. So maybe to me, I would be start younger.
That might be mine. Start younger. I'm stealing yours.
Okay. Okay, great. And then my final question is, where can our listeners find out more about you and what you do?
Yeah, you can listen to the Manifest It Sis podcast. It's located everywhere podcasts are. You can find me at DaniFaust.com. That has a bunch of links to take you all over the place to the Facebook group, which is also called Manifest It Sis. And I have a free goodie, which is a 5-day video course. If you go to bit.ly/manifestin5, the number 5, it's a 5-day video challenge to help you jumpstart your manifesting.
Awesome. We'll put the links to all of that stuff in the show notes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dani.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. I hope you found this conversation insightful and exactly what you needed in this moment. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Remember that I'm rooting for you. I see you out there showing up for your kids and doing the best you can. Sending hugs over the airwaves today. Hang in there. You've got this.